Well, hey there everyone, it's Laurel Beard here, and I'm so happy to be here today because I'm going to show you 5 ways you can heat emboss. 5 different ways that you can heat emboss using your embossing ink refill and some other things you have in your craft room more than likely. First, let's do painting with embossing ink refill. This is a project, I'm throwing it up here in the corner, that I blogged a few days ago, and I had said I made a video and then I got a migraine, so I wasn't able to complete it. So here is this project. I'm going to show you a brand new one. So here I've got some just regular cardstock, and I am squeezing out some of that ink refill, the embossing ink refill, onto my glass. I'm working off of a tempered glass sheet here. I did add a little bit of water to get it moving around because you know the embossing ink refill is quite thick. And then I'm just putting on little paint strokes here and there. No rhyme or reason. Grab different, round, flat, whatever kind of paintbrushes you want to use. And then I'm going to go in with 3 different color embossing powders from Wow. As always, all the supplies that I'm using are linked below in the video description. So here I am going in with the different colors, and I'm just kind of dropping them, strategically placing them, where I want. And then I'll each time funnel the powder back into the jars they came in, and then go on to the next color. This color is Yum Yum Bubblegum. I can't forget this color because I love the name, and now I kind of want to go get a piece of bubblegum. You guys remember way back when that Wrigley's Big League Chew was in? Like that chewing tobacco stuff, like they made it look like that, but it was bubble gum. I used to eat that all the time. And not because it looked like tobacco chew, it's just like bubble gum. Hello, what kid doesn't like bubble gum? Anyway, so I'm going in with the 3rd color here, and because this is the 3rd color, I can go ahead and dump the whole bottle in there because I want powder to be everywhere where I painted on that embossing ink. So here's where you take a dry brush and kind of wipe any powder away where you don't want it and add maybe little paint lines here and there, whatever floats your boat. And then I'm going to go in and heat set this. And oh my gosh, when you're done, can we just talk about the beauty of this background? Just look. It's pretty, isn't it? All right, I want to go ahead and finish off the card here. So I've grabbed a die set from Hutson here, and it's Big Scripty, that is not even a word, Big Scripty Hello. And I ran that through my Gemini Junior. And I'm going to go ahead and do some double heat embossing on that Sentiment Hello. I just pressed my VersaMark pad into it and then poured on 2 different colors of those embossing powders and then heat set it. Which brings me to number 2, the second way to heat emboss, and that's embossing with water. So here I am just putting some water in my hands, and I am dropping on some very large puddles. Obviously, the larger the puddle of water, the more the embossing powder will have to grab onto it. So regular H2O. So I just flicked it on there, and then I'm going in with some embossing powder here, and it sticks to it. So I'm going in and kind of removing some of the big clumps, and then I'm going to heat. Now here is when you heat emboss, you need to heat from the back side first. Otherwise, your powders are going to blow everywhere. And also, because this is water and not embossing ink, it is going to take double, if not triple, the time to heat emboss. But that's cool. It's no problem as long as you know that going in. So just don't think it doesn't work, because it does. It's just going to take you longer than normal because it's not embossing ink. It's not a sticky ink. It's water. So, but you can see I successfully heat embossed. It stays just like embossing powder. It's a great way to emboss if you don't have embossing ink. And here's a look at this finished card. Look at the shine and the texture. And the 3 colors, they work great together. All right, moving on to number 3, that's acrylic block heat embossing. This is probably my favorite, I'll be honest. And I'm showing you little flicks of paint my daughter got into my card there. So here I wanted to make another sample, but wanted to do it on black cardstock instead. So I'm taking my refill and just putting it directly onto my acrylic block. I thought a circle would be perfect. And then I just spread it around with the paintbrush. And then I'm basically stamping with that acrylic block. That block is from Catherine Pooler. And then each time I'm just going in and kind of moving that ink around on the block with my brush. And at this point, just go ahead and pour on your embossing powder. And you can do it with any shape, blocks that you have. I just thought these circles would make a great focal point for a card. At this point here, I'm removing any stray embossing powders, and then I'm going to go in. Now, you need to use a dry brush, by the way, when you're doing this. And I'm going to add little more paint strokes here and there. I wanted it to really look, artsy. So once I added in some paint strokes, I'm going to go in and heat emboss this. Now this time, usually I kind of skip over the entire heat embossing process because it's boring, but in this case, I love watching it melt. Look at that. Look how it melts. My heat gun is good and warmed up, and I just think it's magic. I love it. I love the look of that. So obviously, if you're embossing larger images, you might have to go over it a couple times to make sure all the embossing powder is good and melted. But you're good to go. I mean, it's totally worth. Look at this. It really didn't take long to make this card at all. That's a floral set from Altenew. Again, all the supplies I'm using are linked below in the YouTube description. And I'm going to go ahead and adhere the sentiment. Now, I used a very old distressing dauber, hoping there was a little bit of black ink on that just to kind of soften the white sentiment strip just a tad. It was a little too white for me, so I used whatever was left on that sponge. Now that brings us to number 4. Let's do some rainbow embossing, but this time let's use some ink pads because not everyone, they may not have a bunch of colors of embossing powder. And vice versa, you may not have a bunch of colors of inks, but either way you can do this. For this instance, I'm going to create a rainbow background with some Catherine Puller inks. If you don't have colorful inks, then grab your colorful embossing powders and do the same thing. Whatever you have. I just kind of figured more people might have more colored ink pads than maybe embossing powders. I didn't know. So once I've got all the ink on there and it's good and dry, I'm going to take my VersaMark ink pad here, my embossing ink pad, and just apply a generous coating of that sticky ink directly to the top of my card panel here. Now, if you were using embossing powders, you would do this on a piece of white cardstock and then sprinkle on your embossing powders. That makes sense. So here I am putting on a clear coating of embossing powder. You could use a sparkle embossing powder too, and that would make like a glittery, shiny rainbow, totally whatever you want to do. I'm really bothered by that little blue smudge up at the top. I can't believe I did that. So this card went in a totally different direction than how I envisioned it, but I was going to make it work. I kept it in the video because I wanted to show you can make everything work. So these are large alphabet dies from Altenew. I have placed them where I want to die cut them and then ran them through my die cutting machine. I used the Gemini Junior. At this point, I used my scoreboard and scored a bunch of lines on a piece of black cardstock, and then I am adhering that U down with some liquid glue. And then I'm going in with some white ink just to kind of give it a little chalkboard look. And of course that sentiment is also from an Altenew set. Again, check the supply list below in the description. And here's a look at that card. So you can have a beautiful ombre background or rainbow background or ombre, whatever floats your boat. One of two ways, either use colorful ink pads or use embossing powders and you can get the same look. Last up is partial heat embossing, and I'm going to show this by using a large background stamp. I'm going to take some purple tape and mask off a portion of that stamp, and everything above the tape I'm going to go ahead and ink up with my embossing pad. And then I'll take some cardstock with background stamps. I find it easier for me to take my cardstock and press it into the stamp. Then I get very good coverage every time. And then when you lift it up, you're going to get that beautiful background, just part of it, which I think is outstanding. It's a great way to really stretch your stamps and get some different looks from your backgrounds. I'm also going to go ahead while I have it out and stamp the hello. Now this is going to be a big hot mess, I'm going to tell you, because I had previously stamped with this stamp and did not clean it beforehand. So I do have some stray embossing powders down there near the sentiment hello. It's actually part of the design of the background stamp. Again, I left that in this video because I wanted to show you boo-boos happen with everyone, every single person. Don't let them fool you. I tried hard. I mean, I spent a good 10 minutes with a little tiny paintbrush trying to make that sentiment look perfect, and it didn't work. So I'm going to fix it. I'm going to go ahead and heat set it and just move on and just kind of like pretend it's not there. Like I'm going to be like Hermione Granger and do some magic here, and poof, it's white. You see that? So all I did was restamp that sentiment with some VersaMark, sprinkled on some white embossing powder. I could have done the same green, but at this point I wanted a pop of white, and then cut it and adhered it straight to my card, and no one will ever know that mistake was there. So 5 ways to heat emboss. Here we did some painting with the Embossing Ink Refill. Here is the acrylic block painting where we put the refill on the block and then basically stamp with the block. Here's a look at what it looks like in white with a touch of my daughter on the flower. Here is some rainbow heat embossing with ink pads instead of embossing powders. And here is that partial heat embossing with that beautiful hello sentiment. That white just really makes that card, doesn't it? So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're not a subscriber, please click on subscribe and the notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. Here is a video I think you might like to see, and thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.